Ale jak nisko można upaść?
Thrown into this case, shouldn't she be going after the writers of that book for defamation then?
She should, but I guess the theory would be that there's a source, right? That supposedly Meghan was a source, but it's very bad, respectfully, it's very bad lawyering, very bad pleading from the standpoint. If anything, you should bring everybody in versus...
For years, the story of Meghan Markle, at least the one the world thought it knew, felt smooth, almost too smooth. In this universe, it reads like a script polished within an inch of its life. A girl grows up in Los Angeles. Private school, college, Hollywood auditions, a television break. And then, improbably but irresistibly, a prince. Every year accounted for, every chapter neatly closed. That's why the first crack doesn't come from a reporter or a leaked document. It comes from family.
Television and speak to the British people is that you feel you've been quite seriously misquoted about your sister. I'll cut straight to the chase.
In this telling, Samantha Markle is not chasing headlines. She isn't standing at a podium or waving paperwork. She simply says something that doesn't fit. Something that doesn't attack the story directly, but quietly undermines it. She claims there was a marriage, not later, not during fame. But earlier. Much earlier, a teenage marriage. And, she suggests, consequences that never made it into the official version. At first, the reaction is predictable. People dismiss it as bitterness, estrangement, family drama weaponized for attention. After all, extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. And Samantha, in this narrative, does not arrive with stamped certificates or court filings. She arrives with words, but words can be dangerous when they point to something already missing. What most people miss is that Samantha doesn't invent a new timeline. She points to a hole in the existing one, a quiet gap that has always been there, politely ignored because no one had a reason to look too closely. Until now. Once the idea settles, the question shifts. It's no longer why would she say this? It becomes why does the timeline allow it? And that's when attention drifts toward a year that had never been examined with any real scrutiny. June 1994 is solid in this universe. Graduation from Immaculate Heart High School in Los Angeles. Programs, photos, classmates who remember the day clearly. After that, the story softens. The official narrative says she took a gap year before enrolling at Northwestern University in the fall of 1995. A year to grow, to explore, to figure things out. Perfectly reasonable. Except in this world, no one can quite find the evidence.
Made a mistake, but if you actually listen to what this chief of the charity is saying, she's just trying to run it as it should be run, and he's running it.
No travel photos, no exchange programs, no volunteer records, no host families, no friends reminiscing about shared adventures. Just a year explained but not shown. A full 12 months with no footprint. On its own, that means nothing. Plenty of people live quietly. Plenty of years pass without documentation. But the absence becomes harder to ignore when it aligns too neatly with the claims Samantha makes. A marriage would require time. A pregnancy would require privacy. Both would require distance from the familiar. And suddenly, the gap isn't just empty, it's convenient. In this account, whispers place the teenage Meghan not overseas, not backpacking through Europe, but in Las Vegas. Not the Vegas of movies and neon chaos, but a quieter corner just off the strip. A small chapel people walk past without noticing. The kind of place designed for discretion. According to characters connected to a family called the Giulianos in this story, an 18-year-old Meghan walks in beside a young man named Joe Giuliano. No classmates, no friends, just two relatives as witnesses. The ceremony is brief, efficient, almost forgettable. That's the unsettling part, not spectacle. Silence, no celebration, no photos, no announcements. In this world, the marriage exists only in paperwork, and even that doesn't last. Months later, the record is said to vanish from public reach. Not destroyed, just sealed. Locked away. Unconfirmable. And sealed records have a way of speaking loudly through their absence. To understand why this marriage disappears, the story shifts to the Giuliano family themselves. In this narrative, they are private to the point of invisibility. A traditional Italian-American family based in Chicago. They don't seek attention. They don't tell stories. They believe in handling matters internally, quietly, permanently. Marriage to them is not symbolic. It's binding. But the paths begin to diverge. The young woman they know talks about college, acting, visibility, movement, a future that requires openness. The family values stability, predictability, privacy. No one fights, no one explodes. The tension remains unspoken until, in this account, something arrives that can't be negotiated away. A pregnancy. If true within the story, it would change everything. Dreams compress, options narrow, schedules collapse. By mid-1995, a baby girl is allegedly born, but not into the public narrative. Instead, she becomes part of a private solution. In this world, the Giuliano family steps in. They raise the child themselves. No adoption announcement, no public custody record, no visible link back to the young woman who is preparing to reinvent her life. On paper, the child doesn't exist. Inside the home, she is real, loved, raised, protected. And then comes the legal erasure. The marriage does not end with a public divorce. There are no court battles. Instead, an annulment, quieter, cleaner, more final. In this story, it carries an unusual feature. The records are sealed almost immediately. Annulments don't just end marriages. They claim they never truly existed. And sealing does more than protect privacy. It protects futures. By the fall of 1995, the Meghan enrolls at Northwestern University. A fresh start in every visible way. New friends, new ambitions. A timeline that resumes as if nothing interrupted it. But the interruption doesn't disappear. It's simply absorbed by silence. According to the story's internal witnesses, contact ends completely. No calls, no visits, no acknowledgement. The legal break mirrors a personal one. Joe Giuliano remains present in the child's life. The young woman who gave birth moves forward as if the year never happened. And from that moment on, the public story flows cleanly again. Student, actress, public figure. The gap sinks beneath success. The silence holds until someone decides to point at it. And once a missing year is named, it can never quite go back to being invisible. Silence can last for years when everyone involved agrees it should. In this world, it lasted nearly 3 decades. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Silence was the glue that held the agreement together. Break it, and everything risked collapsing. The woman in Chicago, now grown, was never told she was being hidden. Not in so many words. She was simply raised without questions that led too far back. Her childhood, by all appearances, was ordinary. School, family dinners, holidays, no photographers, no whispers following her down the street. In this version of events, the Giuliano family kept their promise with almost religious discipline. They didn't talk. They didn't hint. They didn't slip. And for a long time, it worked.
Meghan's not backing down, but she's furious this fight isn't over. So, Samantha Markle, there's the briefing from people close to your sister. She's furious. She's saying, she's just trying to move on with her life.
But time has a way of loosening even the tightest arrangements. People age. Perspectives shift. What once felt protective can begin to feel suffocating. And secrets, especially inherited ones, don't disappear. They mature. The first tremor comes quietly. A passing comment from an older relative. A joke that lands strangely. A look held for a second too long when a familiar face appears on television. The woman notices these moments not because they are dramatic, but because they repeat. She begins to ask questions in her late 20s. Not accusations, just curiosity. Family history, medical background. Why certain years don't come up in conversation. Why one name is never spoken. Why the story of her own beginnings always sounds rehearsed. At first, she's met with deflection, then discomfort, then silence. And silence, once noticed, becomes impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the world continues consuming a carefully maintained image. Interviews replay, documentaries circulate, speeches are parsed line by line. The public narrative grows more solid with each retelling, reinforced by repetition until it feels immovable. But immovable stories depend on one thing: no one standing outside them. Samantha Markle's claim doesn't explode immediately. It simmers. It lingers at the edges of conversations, dismissed publicly but quietly reconsidered in private. Because once people hear it, they can't unsee the timeline, the gap year, the sealed records, the sudden restart at Northwestern. None of it proves anything, but together, they create a shape where certainty should be. What makes the silence harder to maintain is that it isn't just one person holding it anymore. It's several, and they are no longer equally invested in protecting the same future. According to the account, the Giuliano family's older generation begins to age out of influence. Those who made the original agreement are no longer the ones living with its consequences. The responsibility shifts to people who never signed anything but inherited everything. That's when the question changes. Not can we keep this secret? But who are we keeping it for? The woman in Chicago isn't looking for money or recognition in this story. She isn't trying to disrupt anything. She simply wants coherence. A sense that her life makes sense from the beginning, not just from the point where others decided it should start. And once that desire surfaces, it cannot be negotiated away. What makes this particularly destabilizing is timing. In this narrative, the world has become more interested in origins than outcomes. People don't just want success stories anymore. They want backstories, messy ones, complicated ones, the kind that prove someone is human. Ironically, the very culture that once demanded perfection now rewards confession. But confession requires control. And control is the one thing this secret was designed to protect. In this version, the pressure doesn't come from tabloids. It comes from inside the family. A quiet confrontation. A conversation that can no longer be postponed. The truth isn't dumped all at once. It arrives in fragments. Enough to confirm suspicion, not enough to resolve it. A name, a place, a year. The woman learns that her beginnings were not accidental, but negotiated. That choices were made for her before she was old enough to understand what choice meant. That her existence wasn't denied out of cruelty, but strategy. And strategy, once revealed, is hard to forgive. Across the country, in a different reality, the image remains intact. But it is held together by distance, not strength. The more successful the public figure becomes, the heavier the past grows. Not because it threatens exposure, but because it requires maintenance. Every appearance, every biography, every retelling, all must avoid 1 year. That's the exhausting part of erasure. It never ends. You don't delete the past once. You delete it every day. In this account, that exhaustion begins to show. Not publicly, not in interviews, but in private decisions. In the tightening of control, in the insistence on managing narratives, rather than allowing them to breathe. And that's where the emotional cost surfaces. Because shame doesn't always look like guilt. Sometimes it looks like rigidity. Sometimes it looks like an unwillingness to revisit anything that predates reinvention. Sometimes it looks like anger when someone else refuses to forget. The Samantha Markle understands this better than anyone. She isn't claiming moral superiority. She isn't presenting herself as blameless. She simply refuses to participate in a silence she didn't agree to. In this narrative, her revelation isn't revenge, it's disruption. She knows the claims will be attacked. She knows people will question her motives. But she also knows something else. Once a missing year is named, it belongs to the public imagination, whether anyone likes it or not. And public imagination is relentless. The story doesn't need proof to exist. It only needs plausibility. And plausibility is built on gaps. That's why the pressure doesn't peak with headlines. It builds slowly, in documentaries that pause too long over timelines, in biographies that suddenly grow vague around specific dates, in commentators who say, "There's just something we don't know." The silence becomes louder than any accusation. In this world, the most painful consequence isn't reputational, it's personal. Because the woman in Chicago now understands that her life was shaped by someone else's fear of interruption. That she was not unwanted, but inconvenient. And inconvenience, when dressed up as protection, leaves deep marks. She doesn't hate the woman who gave birth to her. She doesn't idolize her either. What she feels is something far more destabilizing: distance without closure. And distance without closure eventually demands resolution. This is where the story turns from speculation to inevitability, because secrets that involve more than one generation do not end with silence. They end with choice. Someone, eventually, chooses differently. In this conclusion, that choice hasn't yet been made publicly, but it is approaching, not with a press conference, not with leaked documents, but with a single, irreversible act. Acknowledgement. Not ownership, not blame, just acknowledgement that something existed, and once existence is admitted, control is lost. The irony in this tale is that the truth doesn't destroy the story, it complicates it. It turns a polished narrative into a human one. But the fear was never about destruction. It was about loss of authorship, because the most frightening thing for someone who carefully curates their image isn't scandal. It's no longer being the one who decides what gets remembered. If the woman in Chicago ever speaks, she won't need proof. Her existence will be proof enough. And if she never does, the silence will still tell its own story. One of agreements made in youth, consequences carried into adulthood, and the cost of believing a life can be edited without residue. In this universe, the shame isn't in what happened. It's in believing it could be erased completely. And that belief, more than any revelation, is what ultimately cracks the image, quietly, permanently, and from the inside out.